Okay, welcome to A Pint with Seaniebee. I've got a very interesting guest, a very famous Mexican architect called Armando Ramos, who works for a company called Diverse Projects. He's got a very interesting story, interesting ideas. We met at a party over the weekend, and we're talking for quite some time about, the role of people who have ideas and how we feel governments don't tend to tap into these brains when they're trying to solve big social problems, of which there are many around the world right now. So welcome to the podcast, Armando Ramos.
Thank you.
Before we start, I don't know an awful lot about your company, Diverse Projects. Tell me a bit about what you're doing right now, and then we might go back and see how you got to here.
Great. We're a very new company. We started a year ago. My partner was born in Denver, practiced in New York for 20 years. He lives in Mexico.
Okay.
I live in New York, so that's sort of odd. We consider ourselves a Mexican-American firm.
Okay.
So we both had the experience of working in Mexico and the United States for quite a long time.
Do you do architecture projects for Mexico, for firms that are based here going into Mexico, or for the other way around, or both?
No, both. We do both, and at the moment we also have projects in Colombia. That's part of the idea, is bringing the best of each country to
each other
and other parts of the world. I mean, we're thinking outside the box. One of the things we're doing right now is we're proposing governments to do certain things to make their cities better. And
right.
One of the latest things we did was we figured that political campaigns cost a fortune.
Mm-hmm.
For example, somebody who's running for governor of a state in Mexico spends $40 million.
Yes.
I mean, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
President of the US, I think, is like $1 billion.
Oh, it's more. It's more, yeah, when you take into
it's
advertising.
crazy.
Yeah.
And what they produce is just rubbish. It's garbage. They produce advertising.
Yeah.
They produce T-shirts, stickers.
Yeah. Badges,
and visual shit. I mean,
yeah.
These billboards, with some messages. And what's interesting is they don't produce ideas of substance because they have to be running around trying to get votes.
Yes.
They are all saying the same thing. We're going to make quality of life, health,
jobs, tax
rates, exactly. Yeah. And they don't really have a
concrete idea.
No, they don't. We convinced a campaign donor to go in with us and invest. Instead of buying 10,000 T-shirts, said, okay, give us that amount of money. We'll produce 3 ideas for the state of Hermosillo, it's northern Mexico, border with Arizona. We'll invest also part of our money.
Okay.
Hermosillo has the most obese state in Mexico. Mexico is now the most obese country in the world.
I know.
There's not enough public space in Hermosillo. They're lacking that. Mm-hmm. And then their biggest cultural center for performances is 800 seats. With 800 seats, you cannot really bring
big stuff.
You can't.
Right.
And they're really lacking cultural institutions and cultural programming. So we came in, we saw the potential. I drove around for 3 days and I proposed that we did an open-air auditorium right in the desert, because as a backdrop, having the desert is
beautiful.
Beautiful. It's really beautiful. For 5,000 people. Then you can start having cultural exchanges with
yes.
Other states and certainly with Mexico City. We proposed, there's this abandoned river. Water hasn't flown through it in 40 years. It's like the LA River.
Yeah.
You have 10,000 government employees in front of it. You have a museum, and then you have a house of culture that they're completely disconnected, and a big shopping center. What people do there is they go on the weekends to the mall because it's air conditioned. We propose to do a lineal park, sort of like the Highland but on the river,
mm-hmm.
and then fill it with programming, open air library, hydroponics, water collection, jogging, cycling,
right. Yes.
And then a bridge to connect these 3 institutions to try to make people go out and walk, and also feed these 10,000 government employees. The third one we proposed was to remodel the state gym. The state gym is got an old basketball stadium, also very limited in capacity. It's got 2,000 seats. We proposed to make it 5,000 seats, and then to do juice bar and one of those walls where you can hike, and then a gym, and again trying to motivate health, which the state needs. So we did an infographic about why the state needs all of these things, and we did a brochure that's foldable to give to people. Right now we're calling it architectural propaganda. And I think it makes a lot of sense.
Name, yeah.
I think so, and it makes sense too. What we're proposing governments is, why don't you spend a little bit of money on us?
Yeah.
Generate ideas of substance. If you don't win, those ideas can stay with the state.
Yes.
And somebody else can take them and develop them if they want.
Yes.
Or at least you're not creating garbage that is useless for everybody else.
Do you have copyright over these ideas?
Unfortunately not.
No.
It's very hard to copyright architecture.
Yeah.
The next step is, and we're studying this as well, is how to find the money to do these things. So the metro in Mexico City it was supposed to cost $1.2 billion, ended up costing $2 billion, and they had to close it a week after they opened it.
Yeah.
The construction was ahead of the project. There was really no project. I mean, it was...
Is this bureaucracy and
bureaucracy, corruption?
Corruption, okay.
Lack of planning.
Yes.
So we're telling governments, campaign donors, fund the ideas. Then, when you come into power, you can access state money to develop the project. Then you can go to federal and fund your projects.
Have you? One of the places I lived, which I was really impressed with, was Singapore. I remember when I first went there in '96. There was a big, huge there was a big traffic project being done, like a big highway being made, and there was a huge sign that said, this highway is being turned into a superhighway to take predicted traffic volumes for 2035. And this was in 1996, and it was like, huh? Like, are they that far ahead of things?
That's how it works. Yes.
One of the interesting things Singapore did was Lee Kuan Yew back in the day made politicians one of the highest paid jobs in the state, which of course everyone laughs at. But what ends up happening is mothers and fathers push their children not to law or medicine; they push them into politics.
Right.
And when you get into politics, if you're seen to be taking a backhander when you're in one of the highest paid jobs in the land, well then that's no bueno, so you're out. Is there any solution to it?
You have to change the mindset of people. I think it's an educational thing. We've been dealing with corruption for more than 400 years.
Yes.
It's embedded into the psyche of people. I do think there's a solution, and I think we're getting fed up with that. I do start to see a change.
I feel it too, yeah. All over the world.
Yeah, I think so.
When's the election coming? When does...
It already happened. She won. So
she won.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
And
so when she won, now are you still in dialogue with her? Or
we're still in conversations to see how they make it happen. They have to find the funding.
What was your view living under the last two, like under the Bloomberg regime in New York and now de Blasio? Like what was, certainly from an outsider's point of view, it always felt that Bloomberg was on stuff. He was getting stuff done. I think he invested huge amounts of his own money into the city. But what was your view from the architectural bleachers?
I think it's amazing, and it's an example because he put an emphasis on design, you're right, and architecture, and you saw the city transform itself. The amount of public parks he added,
the High Line,
but also a lot of spaces were unutilized. On Broadway, for example, these triangles that are there caught between, he converted them to parks, or in Brooklyn, also a lot of the waterfront. They turned out to be amazing public spaces. He rezoned, I think, 2/3 of the city. I mean, it's insane.
The cycling, the
420 miles of cycling lanes.
Yeah,
the whole Times Square thing.
We were talking at the weekend when we met about the refugee crisis in which started last year in 2015 in Syria, and the influx of immigrants into European countries, the EU countries. When these refugees were coming in, everyone starts going, well, what about our own homeless? And it struck me that there was nobody who was saying, like what you just did, like, well, what if we could build some low budget plastic durable housing for these people, and in some of these spaces that lie empty. Why do you think that kind of level of creativity is missing? Because it is kind of missing in so many conversations.
I think that people that make these decisions, they're not equipped. They don't think that way, and they're not paid to pay that. They're not paid to think that way. When you take abandoned structures, the concrete is there, the steel structure is there. Not in your case, but in our case, in Baja California, the weather is that's so
favorable.
I mean, you can just wrap it around in that orange plastic used in constructions and use it.
Yeah,
you don't need to finish it. Put windows in. Used to be that for every 10 people that arrived to the border, 1 crossed, 9 stayed.
Right.
So you got all these people there. use these structures.
Yeah.
Do plastic modules. Do
Yeah.
do something creative. House people there.
It doesn't feel like that expensive. It feels like something that's doable. That's like if you get just everyone singing off the same page, that you could just get this happening.
It's totally doable, and then it costs you less than having the structure there just rotting, and then the negative image you give as a country, as a city.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's an intangible cost, but if somebody could figure that out.
How did you get? So just maybe going back to see how you managed to get here. You're from Mexico City. Yeah? What was growing up there like?
That's a good question. It's I grew up part of the year in California and the other part of the year in Mexico City, mainly in Mexico City, and I did see a transformation from the population. We're now we've been one of the largest cities in the world for quite a while.
Yeah.
But growing up, it was not that big, but also I saw the transformation from a normal city to an extremely violent city. I mean, it was bad. That's why I left, actually, 15, 16 years ago.
So give people a picture of that. Like, was it... We're in a kind of a terrorist world in cities right now where people are jumpy and worried about what's going to happen. Like, was it like that all the time?
It was. It was. I mean, I got robbed at gunpoint, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. I got attempted kidnapping twice.
Wow.
Once you have those events in your life, you become aware of everything that's going on around you the whole time. You could drive through the city and see on one side of the street luxurious buildings, and on the other side the favela sort of structures, like side by side.
Yes.
I've never seen that contrast anywhere else.
Yeah.
I'm saying there isn't, but I've never seen it like that. I recently met up with some friends, and we started talking about, we were 16, 17, and I guess there was a lot of things that I just didn't I don't know if I didn't remember or didn't want to remember.
Yeah.
But as they were telling stories, it's amazing. Yeah, amount of violence, again, you're talking about bodyguards, guns, gangs, you're talking about being irresponsible and not really being aware. I don't know if you're aware of danger at that age.
So were you from a kind of prosperous family? Were your parents?
Yes.
What do they do?
My father is a successful builder and developer. I mean, yes, we were guarded. We had a great life growing up, but then I started realizing I didn't want to live in fear anymore.
Yes.
It made no sense to me whatsoever.
Is it still like that now today when you go back?
No, it's changed.
Right.
It's changed. I mean, the city has changed so much.
Okay.
There's been really good initiatives, really bad ones too, but there's been good initiatives. The crime has moved out to other states, other cities. It's become a wonderful city nowadays.
Okay. And so did you go to college in Mexico, or where did you?
I went to college in Mexico City, and I took my first job in my second semester as an architect. So I would go work from, let's say, 8:30 till 3, and then I would go to college from 4 to 10 every day.
Why architecture? Because you were young. This is when you're about 18, is it? Right?
18, yes.
Right, okay.
I decided to be an architect when I was 11 years old.
Why?
I remember being at my parents' house, and they said, come down, the architect is coming, he's going to show us what the house is going to look like.
Right.
And he unrolled this perspective drawing he did by hand, and I was just blown away, completely blown away, that this man could see the future, imagine the future, and draw the future. I love to draw, but seeing how this perspective drawing for the first time completely blew me away, and I decided right there, I mean, on the spot, that's what I wanted.
Was Frank Lloyd Wright a hero, and Johnson and these people, were they in your...
Frank Lloyd Wright, for sure. I've always loved his architecture, and I didn't learn much of architecture from that point until I was 18. I knew I was in love with it, but I didn't necessarily read anything about it. When I was 14, I decided to be a musician, so I sort of changed routes. And
what did you play?
I used to play the drums and got a rock band, and then I decided I was going to be in a band, and that was going to be my future.
And were they successful?
We were starting to gain traction,
Okay.
and then you have the usual problems where, you know, one guy steals the other guy's girlfriend, the other one has a girlfriend somewhere else, so he just leaves and never shows to rehearsal.
It's always women who break up rock bands, Yoko Ono, if you're listening. There's one of the best documentaries I've ever watched, and anyone who's listening, if you can get your hands on it, you may have seen it, which was it's a 2-part, brilliantly made documentary on Frank Lloyd Wright's life. He was very famous when he was young, and then he went dark for years and years.
Correct.
And the first DVD finishes, and the second DVD starts when he's 64 years of age. And by the way, in the first DVD, he had he lost his wife and kids in a murder situation at his house, and he was enfant terrible, and then he was gone, and he was training architects, and then he had this friend of his who I think felt sorry for him and said, "I've just bought this land and there's a waterfall coming out of it," and
that's correct.
He sent all his little fellas out to plot the entire area, and then they came back and they were waiting for him, and he did nothing for ages. He just sat there on it. And apparently the guy was coming in wherever they were living, and it was a 4-hour drive to Frank Lloyd Wright's studio, and he took out his thing and he just worked for 4 hours, and by the time the guy arrived, he had it, and he had every rock and every tree, and the result was a very famous building that brought him back called Falling Water. Yeah.
Correct. Have you been there?
No, I haven't seen it. I've just seen it on video.
I went last year. I've always been fascinated with Wright's architecture. He somehow, I think he understands proportion like nobody else.
Right.
His spaces are they can be so intimate, but they can be so grand at the same time. And you're right. That house is what spawned his career, because all this modernists came about, and then he was outdated, and all these European architects started coming to the U.S. and then he had no work, and Falling Water gave him his.
Then he did the Johnson Wax building. It's an amazing documentary. You're also a big fan of Gehry, yeah?
Big fan of Frank Gehry. I think he revolutionized architecture in the way Picasso revolutionized painting.
Yeah, certainly for me, creatively, I love when things polarize people. Buildings or ads or art or whatever that some people hate and some people love, because I think that's then you have debate. So what happened then? So you did your college. You were working in an architectural firm. Were you in Mexico City?
Yes, I was working in Mexico City, and then I was fortunate because my architecture program had 5 years of history of art and architecture. So I studied all these civilizations and masterpieces and buildings. So at 23, again because of the violence and security and other things, I decided to just go to Europe and move to Europe and try to get a job there, which was sort of insane, I think, just to think that I was going to do that. So I packed up, left, traveled through Europe looking at all these great buildings that I've always wanted to see, and then I got a small job in the south of Spain, doing Palladio-style houses for rich people, which I hated doing. I really hated that. Then I decided to go back to California.
Right.
And again, everybody told me I was crazy. Everybody says, "How are you going to get a job? You don't know anybody there.
Yeah.
And you've never done anything there." I said, "Don't worry, I'll figure something out." So I went, I did a master's degree, and I remember I was running out of money. I think I had money left for 2 weeks or something like that.
Wow.
And so the school's principal saw my work, and he said, "Do you need a job?" And I said, "Yes, I do need a job," like immediately. He said, "Well, I just came to this position. I usually don't recommend anybody from our school, but I have a friend that is always looking for talented people, and he turned out to have the largest office in San Diego at the time, like 120 architects. I've never seen in my life anything like that. I really couldn't believe it. So I got, I went there, I interviewed, and I got the job like the next day.
Brilliant.
I was able to fund my
tuition.
My tuition, live, and I learned a lot. It was a special moment in San Diego.
Who is this guy now?
It's called Austin Beum Robbins Partners. It was a moment when San Diego was turning its downtown into, they were redoing the whole thing. They were rethinking the Gaslamp district. I remember growing up, downtown San Diego was full of homeless people. It was dangerous.
Yeah.
Everybody went to work there and then left.
Yeah.
It died at night and then...
Yeah, because actually in San Diego it started popping up out in all those little towns up north, right?
Right.
But I stayed downtown. It's kind of cool. I liked it, and I love that little trip across to the island and all.
Oh,
that stuff.
Coronado Island. Yeah, they did a great job. I was very fortunate to be a part of that moment in the history of that city, because I saw how you can transform a downtown into a live-work place where it's walking-oriented, mixed use. Yeah. The stadium is great, right in the middle of the city.
Yeah. Airport's right there as well.
Yeah.
And so how long? So then, when did you decide you were going to do your own thing, or?
I started designing houses in Baja California.
Right.
So I quit and I started doing that, and it was 2006. San Diego and Baja California were booming like the rest of the world. There was condos being built all over.
So loads of money coming in.
I wouldn't say loads, but money was good.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, I was...
Like, it was your own practice then?
My own practice.
And then did you have like 20 people working for you, or?
I had a bunch of people, and it's ironic. I mean, I was being more successful than I am now, and most of my friends at the time doing other things.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe what was happening.
Yeah.
And then one day, everything collapsed. Clients started calling one by one. Projects were shutting down, and I was again extremely fortunate that I was doing a competition in Mexico City, and let me backtrack a little bit. I had a client that wanted to do this 70-story tower in Tijuana.
Right.
Which sounds very surreal. And he said, choose any architect in the world you would like to work with. And I said, Frank Gehry. He's like, great, let's call him up. Okay, sure. So he picks up the phone, calls Frank, he arranges a meeting with Frank, and there we are, sitting down with Frank Gehry, having lunch with him at his office.
Where?
In Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, right.
And they gave us a tour of the office.
Were you starstruck?
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I remember, I was dressed like any other architect, dressed in black, and I used to wear glasses back then.
Right.
I remember being there and Frank telling me, "Are you an architect? You look like an architect." I said, "Well, you look like an architect too, Frank." Just laughed.
And so what happened to the project?
The project didn't get built, but they gave me this tour of the office, and I saw how they worked, and I fell in love with the way they worked. And
Frank Gehry's place.
Yes,
right.
And that's exactly how I would like to work the process, because it's very manual. He doesn't design in a computer. It's very, very manual, but then it gets translated. And then I was also fascinated by the fact that they could figure out these crazy structures. Like, I want to learn that. I need to learn that. So came back to my office, started researching on their software, their things. And I came across this company called Gehry Technologies, which is the sister company that figures all this out.
So this is how to get the fluid movement and curves and all that stuff he's famous for. Okay.
Right. So I called them up and said, I have this competition in Mexico City. I need your help. I designed this thing that I really couldn't figure out. I spoke to the CEO, and he said, I'll go down to see you. I said, no, don't worry, I'll go to Los Angeles. I've been there. I've met Frank. So I went there, submitted the competition. We didn't win, but we started a relationship. And so when 2008 happened and the crash happened, Stuart, the then CEO of Gehry Technologies, invited me to work with them.
Great.
I said, no, it's like an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
We brought the company to Mexico, again, 2008. We transformed the industry in Mexico, because we brought not only software, but we brought a know-how, a process.
And is that company still there? Or
No, when I quit, they closed Mexico, but I also took them to Brazil.
Right.
They're still in Brazil.
And why did you quit?
So I fell in love with New York. Madly in love with New York. And
what was the draw? I'm not a big fan. What was the draw? No. What was the draw?
Maybe DNA, I'm not sure, but before landing, I remember I took the red eye from Los Angeles, and I remember waking up and looking down and looking at the city, and
Marvel.
it was decided.
To be fair, when I arrived here, you get that. Okay, I am now in the biggest city in the world. I'm in the place that if the Martians land, this is where they'll come to.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so diverse. It's so rich. It's so unexpected, magical. I mean, it's got everything.
Yeah. It was stimulating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Extremely stimulating, and I had no idea I was going to learn everything I learned. I mean, it's been painful, but I didn't know that I was going to grow so much. Just learning from public policy, learning from how the city works, learning from new buildings, learning from other architects, from artists, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
From everyday life. So I was just, I mean, it was very simple.
So you were back kind of, you were taking a step back just to get re-energized sort of thing, right? And
I also wanted to go back to being an architect because, in Gehry Technologies,
it was process, it was, yeah.
A lot of business development, growing, expanding the company into Latin America, and it was technology, application into construction.
Yeah.
And it was great to learn that, but I wanted to go back to being an architect.
And so what's happened since you moved here? What's your life been like?
3 years ago, I decided to do design development because I still think that architects take more control of the process and ownership. We could get better buildings. Yeah. People making the decisions are not the architects, so they cut their budget, they do value engineering. Yeah. They just, who makes these decisions? And how do they make the decision of taking this out of the building or that? We've lost all the power as architects. Yeah. What I mean by power is, think of the master builder, think of the Renaissance, think of the Gothic cathedrals. The architect would come in and he would be there at site and he would be determining. There was no project managers back there, right? There was no. I mean, we built all this infrastructure.
I'm feeling great parallels with the ad industry here.
And we built, so many disciplines around this to mitigate risk, supposedly. But are we really doing that?
Do you think there will be another renaissance? I mean, do you think that beauty has got lost in our cities?
Well, to quote Frank Gehry, back to Gehry, he recently said 98% of what we're building is shit. Yeah. And I agree. And that's the reason I decided to found a design and development company, because what's driving architecture today is returns. It's money, period. Yeah. A bunch of people sit in a room, they make investments, and they're like, we need to build this as fast and as cheap as possible so we can start getting returns. So if you think about the cathedrals, what was the driver behind the cathedrals? It was art. It was God.
Yeah, glorification of God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If they had the mentality we have today,
we just have a wooden cross with
pretty much, a shack probably.
Yeah.
But here's what we gotta think: if you can calculate the amount of value added around that cathedral, if you look at, let's say, Notre Dame in Paris, how much do you think the real estate around it is worth?
Yeah, opera house,
Exactly. Yeah. So you can create
icons.
But you need to be, forward thinking. You need to think differently. So I partnered up with this financial guy, and we said, okay, what if we partner finance and design? If we can understand each other's world, we can do. It would be interesting.
Yeah. I think governments have a role to play here, because governments represent the people. There's nobody on the earth who would go, no, I don't want something like Notre Dame in the center of my city. I want something that after I'm dead and gone, people will appreciate and talk about and visit. Who said it always has to be ugly?
It doesn't have to be ugly. If you look at what we're building around nowadays, it's boxes all around. Before we even sit down and start designing, the rules have been established by public policy, by lawmakers. Yeah. Sometimes these people don't know anything about what we do or how to change a city, and the laws are there. If you put government, economics, and architecture together, I think you can achieve a great thing.
Yeah, I agree.
But the three of them don't communicate.
Yeah.
They never sit around the table.
I think what we're saying, before we finish, is that the reason that is not happening is that the people who are controlling the purse strings, be they public or private sector, don't really have the aesthetic in their head about what's this going to be like in 100 years' time. We're not. I don't think we're building stuff for 100 years' time anymore.
I don't think we are, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But also, we as architects need to take more responsibility, and we need to take charge of these things, and we need to start thinking differently, and we need to approach politicians. We need to understand finance better, So it's also our responsibility not just to be sitting, in our table drawing magnificent ideas, but to go out there and understand. We need to also understand how other industries and how other professionals work in order to communicate with them.
Armando, that was a great chat. We were talking, as we said on Saturday, about having this chat, and it was great for you to come in and have a pint with Seaniebee. And
Thank you.
I'm wishing you every success in the future. I love the idea. I know some of my friends who are architects will like listening to this show, because I think that there's, to me, just as an outsider, there's a germ of revolution, or there's a germ of new thinking or new ways of looking at it. And also, I'm a great believer in using creativity to solve solutions. So wishing you every luck with the new company and the new projects that you're doing, and maybe you can get the politicians to do actual things instead of talking about them all the time. So thank you for coming on the podcast.